Yo, you guys, what's up? This is your girl Dragon. Welcome to the channel. It's time to jump into another live Fortnite Creative UEFN tutorial. We're going to be using event binding, which allows you to use this mechanic in both Fortnite Creative and UEFN. This tutorial request came through my last tutorial when I showed you guys how to build a fashion show. That's on YouTube. If you didn't catch it, be sure to check out the video and drop a sub so you don't miss any new tutorials. If you do, I really appreciate you. Thank you. This tutorial is going to show you how to build a random team selector per player. So in the tutorial here, you'll see that one player will be assigned a random team while the other player remains on the global team. And you're actually able to connect this to each player in the game by basically separating the unit. So I'll go ahead and get into that explanation after we run the playtest so I can show you what we're building. Let's do it. All right, when players start, they are going to be on the global team. After a few seconds, one player is going to be switched to a random team, and I am team 2. Now every time the game starts, and we'll go ahead and start the game again, the player that activates the random number generator is going to be placed on a random team. Now there is situations in which they can be placed on the same team. We only have 4 teams here, so keep that in mind. So last example was team 2, now I'm team 1, perfect. So that you can see every time it is random. And that's what we're building today. This is a great way to randomize teams. Let's say you're going to be figuring like special abilities and you want each player to be on a separate team with those special abilities, team and class with those special abilities. What you'll do is assign this RNG system to each player. So you'll have a separate system for each player in the game in order to do that. All right, so just starting with this example, I'm going to go ahead and explain to you guys this, the structure so you can understand what's going on. When a player spawns in the game, they're going to be set on a global team. This player spawn pad is connected to player 1, and this is of course player 2, and so on. So if you have more than one player, you'll connect those here. Each player spawning pad is connected to a player reference device. This player reference device is connected to the first player that spawns into the game, and it registers on all these player reference devices. When they spawn into the game, a timer will begin saying, hey, it's time to pick teams. When the time runs out, and I don't want to fit, in addition to that, when the timer starts at the game start, the RNG device will also activate at game start too. When the timer runs out, the RNG device would have selected a team. And you can see that each portion of the sequencer is connected to a trigger device. When it lands on, let's say it lands on this trigger here, it's going to activate the player reference device and switch the player that is assigned to the player reference device to a team in a class. In addition to that, it's going to show a message that shows, hey, you're on this team. And that's the basic structure of this easy setup. Let me go ahead and run you guys through the settings. So let's do it. All right, so as you can see here, let me just also run through the devices too. You're going to need, of course, player spawner pads, a timer device, a class designer, a class selector, a team settings and inventory device, and a channel device. This is for your global class, and the channel device is for your spawn events. You're going to need a random number generator, also known as a RNG device, and a trigger for each team that you're going to be randomizing within this device. So I only have 4 teams, therefore I only have 4 triggers. In addition to that, for the player that spawns in, that's going to be connected and registered to the player device and to this RNG, you can see this is only for player 1. You're going to need a player reference device for each team. So I have 4 player reference devices. And then for that set, our unit, if you want to call it this like entire unit here, you're going to need a class designer, a class selector, and a team settings and inventory device for that team. And then a HUD message device. This is optional if you want to display a message to the player to let them know what they have been switched to. All right, now that you know all that, let's jump into the settings. All right, so for the first spawn pad, this is always set to team 1. Again, if you guys watch a lot of my tutorials, I have a designated pad because the first player that spawns into the game is always going to be on team 1. So I know that when they spawn here, and if I need to call certain events, I'll go ahead and designate one pad to team 1 so that player can go ahead and start events if needed be. Every other pad is set to team any and class any and island start. This is where you would place your pre-game pads and where you would want these events to start. So let's go ahead and jump into that. And you see there's no functions. And for events, we have quite a few things going on here. So for the first event, we're going to transmit on the channel spawner. And when I have this on the channel device, I apologize, channel spawn events. And then we're also going to be registering that player to every player reference device. So you can see I have one here for team 1, for team 2, and team 3 and team 4. This is named in the wrong name, but no worries. So you have team 1, team 2, team 3, and team 4, as well as the channel device. All right, and that's back here. So the channel device is called channel spawn events, and when it receives a transmission, it's going to be receiving a transmission from the player spawners, both of them, right? From the player 1 and player 2 that's on this map. And you can see that that is going to be binded right here. And I'm going to go ahead and remove that player reference from there because that was duplicated, so that shouldn't be there. It should look like this. And for the settings, you can see here, player team any, class any, and so forth. All right, after it receives that transmission, when the player has spawned into the game, we're going to change player to team and class to the global class and team. We're also going to enable the random number generator and activate it at the same time. So you don't want this to start until players are actually in the game. Or you can have it start at a particular event that you feel is necessary for your game. All right, team settings and inventory. This is pretty straightforward. I have it named as global, a team of 7 in a class of 7. There's no additional configurations due to this tutorial, so everything here is set to don't override. Feel free to configure your global team if you want to, and you can see there's no functions and there's no events. And then for class selector, this is what we have here. Class to switch to is 7, and team to switch to is 7. We're going to be changing player to team and class when receiving from the channel spawn events device on receive transmit. All right, and that should be already binded. And this is what you'll use to basically configure your global class. Make sure the class identifier is matching your class for global, which is 7. And then if you want to set any particular things like invincibility or start with a pickaxe or anything like that, this is where you'll do that. And due to tutorial, this is all don't override on default settings, as you can see there. All right, cool. Next, let's take a look at the timer. So for tutorial purposes, it's set at a duration of 7 seconds, and the timer name is picking a team. It's going to start when the game starts. So start at game start, it's on. Players cannot interact, so we set that to no. This does apply to everyone for this tutorial. And then when the timer is running, we're going to have it say picking your team. It's also going to show on HUD and so forth. There are no functions, and there are no events. And that's because this is activated with the channel device. Let's take a look at the random number generator for player 1. So we have a value limit of 1, and we only have 4 teams. So value limit 2 is 4. The winning value is 0, and that's because if the device picks a number equal to or higher than this value, it wins. The roll time is 1 second higher than the timer. So you notice the timer device is 7, the roll time is 8. That means on the 8th second, it's going to pick a team and pick each number once is set to no, and so forth. All right, we're going to enable when receiving from the channel device, which should already be binded, and activate when you receive from the channel device as well. This is going to actually start the RNG device. And there you go. Next, let's take a look at the triggers that's connected to each section of the RNG device. This is trigger for player 1, and again, don't mind the names there because I have quite a few devices on the map. So this is trigger for player 1, team 1. And then on triggered, we're going to send an event to the player reference to activate. And this is the player reference device connected to team 1, player 1. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the rest of that set. This is player reference, player 1, team 1. Again, it's going to register when the receive from the player spawner that is assigned to the first player that spawns in the game. Activate when received from the trigger that's selected from the RNG device after the roll time. And when it is activated, we're going to send an event to the class selector to change the player to team and class. And that's going to take place right here. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. All right, we're going to switch to class of 1 and a team of 1. And this should already be binded. Change player to team and class when receiving from the player reference. Player 1, team 1 on activated. Next, for events, when the team is switched, we're going to send an event to the HUD message device to show. And before we look at the HUD device, let's take a look at the configuration. So we have team settings and inventory for team 1, class 1. And this is all default, so we can just go through that. You see it says don't override. There's no settings for this. And there's no functions and there's no events. And then the class designer is what you'll use to configure any special abilities you want this team or class to have. So we have it set to class 1 and so forth. Again, everything else here is default, but this is where you'll set your invincibility, if you want them to run fast, if you want them, to have overshield or not, if you want them to sprint, and so forth. And no functions, no events, all right? Cool. Next is the HUD message device. So you can see it's going to show team 1, and it's only set to the triggering player. It's only going to show for 5 seconds, and then everything from here show for duration and on down is your personal preference. Make sure it's set to not show on round start. All right, so I'll just go through that. Show when receiving from the class selector on team switched. So that's the class selector assigned for player 1, team 1 on class switched. Or team switched, my apologies. Okay, that's the whole unit for team 1. So you can see every other unit is practically is practically the same and connected to each other. So let's go ahead and go through it. And this one untriggered, we're going to set an event to the player reference player 1, team 2 to activate. And that will activate this entire set right here. Again, registering when the player spawns into the game. Activate when receiving from the trigger. And when activated, we're going to switch player to team and class, which will be team 2 of a class 2. And then on team switch, we're going to show that HUD message device. Again, this should already be binded. Change player to team and class when receiving from the player reference device on activated, and then show that HUD message device once the team is switched. All right, and then configurations. Again, we have it to a team 2 with a class of 2. And let's see, no functions, no events, right? And then the class designer is also set to a class of 2. And no functions, no events. Again, configurations are all up to you. And then the HUD message device will show team 2, triggering player, and so forth. We're going to show when that team is switched to class 2 via the class selector. All right, there we go. Cool. All right, let's go ahead and take a look here at team 3, the third unit. All right, you see here we're switching to class 3, team of 3. And then team settings and inventory is a team of 3 with a class of 3. And then for the class designer, class of 3. And now for the last unit. right, class to switch to is 4, team is 4. Again, everything else here is default. For functions, change player to team and class when receiving from the player reference device on activated, and that is the player reference device connected to this unit. And when team is switched, we're going to send an event to the HUD message device to show. Let's check out the configurations for this team. And ensure that your class designer is also reflecting that class set for the team, which is a class 4. And everything else, again, you can adjust anything here if you want class 4 to have any special abilities. And then last is the HUD message device. And again, this shows team 4 for the triggering player and so forth. All right, and that's how you complete that unit. Pretty simple, right? Now, as stated at the beginning of the tutorial, if you need to do this for each player in the game, then as you see how this is connected to player 1 that spawns into the game, you will need an RNG device, an additional, you wouldn't need actually an RNG device and a player reference, but you wouldn't have to duplicate the class selectors, right? But you'll need an RNG device, a new set of triggers, and a new player reference for each player in the game. And you'll have that setting for each individual player. So, for example, I would duplicate all these, right? And now we have like a system for player 2. I would go here and remove the registration from this, from this, from this, from this, right? And then let's see, this is 14, this is 13, 12, and 11. And then for this player, I'll go ahead and on spawned, I'll go ahead and add those player reference devices. Like that to register the player, right? Then it's still connected to activate, on activated to switch them to the team. That's connected to the trigger. and it'll go ahead and do that for that set. You guys go ahead and experiment, give that a shot, and see what you can do with it. I do hope this tutorial has been helpful. I'm going to go ahead and run another play test, and we'll go ahead and check it out. All right, we are both global. And I'm team 1 and the other player is team 4. And that's how that works. You see how easy that is? You guys got this. Can't wait to see what you do with this. It's an amazing building block. And I do think, you know, for the request that came in for it, I do hope it helps you guys out, and I will see you guys on the next one. Much respect. Take it easy. Bye.